Hey, yo, welcome back to another episode of the most nuanced holistic health and fitness podcast hosted by your favorite crunchy strength and conditioning coach. I'm Kelsey Moore, and today is my 29th birthday. And fun fact, which maybe people actually already know this, but maybe they don't. But every time a birthday comes around, everyone's like, your 29th year, your 30th year, whatever the birthday is. And I'm like, no, home dog, your birthday is the completion of the year. Like when you have a birthday party for a 1-year-old kid, it's because they completed 1 year of being alive. Also, I always think like, why aren't we giving happy birthday balloons to to moms as like newborn gifts? It's like happy birthday. It's like literally their birthday. I don't know. I have obviously strong convictions about birthdays. But those are my two pieces of, information, I guess, regarding birthdays. Anyways, I have completed 29 rounds around the sun, and this year has been so stinking interesting. I started More & Co. officially, which I'll briefly hit on how the heck I got started with that. Started this podcast, which I'm finally feeling like I'm getting in the groove now, talking to this camera by myself, just taking an average Monday afternoon, just talking to myself on the computer, just about pretty much anything I want to talk about, which has been, again, fun, which has been the whole point. I've made so many good friends over the internet. I've learned so much about like starting a website and like marketing and what the heck I'm supposed to be doing. And I changed my job and so much happened in this 29th year, but I'll quickly run over it. But again, I guess today I really wanted to go over some reflections for my birthday. And also, I just hit my first peaking point on my training for eventually leading up to my 50-mile trail race that I'm going to do in April. But my first, big training run is technically a race. It's a 50K race in 2 weekends. And I just hit my first peaking point. So my biggest sets of mileage this past weekend, which was yesterday, which was a doozy. I'll talk about it. And then I'll probably do that again for my second 50K race, which is in March, leading up to that second practice trail run. And then I'll probably have a third one leading up to my 50 miler. So instead of my coach just writing like 30 miles like on my training program, he was like, just sign up for a couple races and we'll include them. So that's basically how we did it. And I'm still hoping to have him on the podcast. I just need to get it scheduled. But George Briones has been a godsend. He is my running coach. Granted, I hired him, so, he's a godsend. But also, I pursued him to be my coach. But he's definitely given me the level-headedness that I needed out of a coach. So if he, is listening to this randomly, then George, just know that I appreciate you. And I'm sure at some point I'll go over how I met him. Maybe I'll talk about it today. Who knows? No idea how long this episode will be. Anyways, it's my birthday. It's my birthday. That's how my husband always sings it. He goes, it's my birthday. He says it like a teenage girl, um, which I always think it's funny. But we went out to lunch today and it was so fun. And, as every military spouse kind of says at some point, there's no guarantee that you're going to spend like every birthday or anniversary or holiday with them. And so the fact that my husband was home and we were able to go out to eat and spend that time together is just an absolute blessing. Just to start off with. But yeah, did that. Got a couple of packages in the mail and it was so cute. Got it from my mom and I got a plant for my husband and I got a little plant for my coworkers. And it was so kind of them just to think of me. And I feel very blessed in that area, which was so nice. But this year, 29th year, man. Okay, so let's go a year back. Year back, February last year, 2023. I was still working at and for the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Go Tar Heels. I was coaching there. I was starting up my spring season. I was a track and field strength coach there. And track season obviously is a winter sport and a spring sport. I ran track and field in college, which was part of the helpful portion of me getting that job originally was knowing the background of track and field. And being a track and field strength coach is very unique because to some extent, they don't really need you. Like those track coaches don't really need me. Like I was there for a reason, like I was the the weight room advocate. I was the liaison. I did program for them. I was a coach. I was technically on the Olympic strength and conditioning staff, and I just had track and field. So by number, I had, I think, 120 to 150 athletes, and I covered all 3 seasons. I covered cross country in the fall, I covered indoor track in the winter, and I covered spring, regular outdoor track and field. So I had everybody. I had men's and women's. I had the distance runners. I had the throwers. I had the jumpers. I had the vaulters. I had the sprinters. I had the mid distance. I had everybody. And I had a program for every single group. I think at one point I counted, I had like 7 or 8 groups, whereas other strength coaches on the Olympic staff, maybe they had like 2 or 3 teams, but they programmed 2 or 3 programs generally. I was programming like 7 to 8 programs, and dang, that was overwhelming. But I mean, I was working in some of the top levels of college athletics. Like, there are some amazing things to see at that level. I worked in the Taj Mahal of strength and conditioning facilities. I worked pretty much right outside the door of the main football stadium. Every single day I ran in the football stadium. Like, that's something that was just blew my mind when I was there. I worked with athletes who were going to go and try to compete in Olympic trials. I have one athlete who might even be on the Olympic team this year. Like, it's amazing, and that's where I was February of last year. I the job previous to that, I was working at Fort Riley in Kansas, because that's where my husband and I were. Well, that's where my husband was stationed, so that's what made us live there. But I worked for the Air Force there for 4 years, and then my husband got orders to come work here in North Carolina, and it's was difficult to transfer my job. There really wasn't like a transferring option at the time to like come just work for the Air Force unit here, which is what I'm currently doing. So it took me a year. My husband PCS here. We lived a year apart. I was living in Kansas. Wow, I took you another year back. So we're just rewinding this whole thing, details about my life you didn't ask for, but you're listening. So we spent a year apart. My husband was here. We bought a house here in Moore County. I had an apartment in Kansas, still working for the Air Force. Took me a while to get a job. I really wanted to continue to work for the Air Force, but to be honest, I was like, at some point I need to like expand my horizon, my options on these jobs. And Chapel Hill was going to be about an hour and 20 minutes from the house that we had purchased in Moore County. And I had been in contact with several coaches on that staff, and I had made good rapport with them. At some point, a position opened up for the track and field strength coach position. I applied for it. I think there was like 100 and something people that applied for that job. I don't know. Applied for that position, took a couple weeks. They trimmed it down. I kept staying in contact with them. Finally, I got an email saying there were 10 applicants left to do a phone interview. So I did a phone interview. I remember it to this day. I was sitting on my couch in my apartment, my little 1-bedroom apartment, just putting on my most confident Kelsey Army voice possible, my best coaching voice. And I felt like I nailed it, which apparently I did, because I got the job. But 10 applicants, did a phone interview. Then they emailed me like 5 days later and asked me to fly out. They had 3 applicants left for that position. And I got called to fly out. And I remember that weekend my mother-in-law was in town, that I got that email, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to figure out my interview outfit. Like, this is totally not my deal. Like, as a coach, like, you just wear sweats every day. And I am an absolute tomboy to the fullest extent. And I was like, I need to look like $1,000,000 in the best way possible. I need to be the most feminine and confident person walking in that room. And anyways, got all that ironed out. It was literally divine intervention that my mother-in-law was already going to be there, like with me, visiting me. And I was like, well, we need to use this weekend to prepare for my interview. So we did. I made a PowerPoint. I got my dress ready. I had like my power suit, ego on. I had my heels. I was going to crush it. Went to that interview. I'm giving you so much backstory, but that's the point of the podcast. I went to the interview. I felt so confident. I remember leaving that interview. Well, mother side detail. When I went to go check into the hotel, when I got to Chapel Hill, I flew in. I got to the hotel. There was something like wrong with like the accounting number where they, you know, booked my hotel room because obviously UNC paid for everything when they fly people out for interviews. There was some accounting problem wrong. And so I just like stood at the front desk and I was like, I'm not paying for this hotel. Like, not that I was being rude or anything. I just was like, this is like not really my problem. I'm just like the interviewee here. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to stand off to the side. Like, you can call, because they needed to call the people I was going to like be interviewing with. There was no way in heck I was going to call the head coach and be like, hey, my hotel room isn't paid for. Like, there was no way I was going to do that. I was already scared poopless to be there. No way I was going to call him. So I just had the front desk person call. Yeah, his name's Coach Gatz, Craig Gatz, who ended up being my boss. And but when that whole debacle was going down, they ended up telling me the names of the other two interview like applicants that they flew in. And I stood there and I was like, I have a moment of either self-control to not look up who these people are, who are my competition, or I'm going to give into it and I'm going to look up these dang people. And you know what I did? I looked them up, baby. Of course I did. Of course I looked them up. And at first I was like, well, there's no shot for me getting this stinking job because one guy I think was like a strength coach at Stanford. The other guy was a head strength coach, I think out of like South Dakota or something. And they both like very much looked like each other. Gigantic, classic, like meathead strength coach, the whole thing, right? Then there's me. Then there's little Kels, 5 feet tall, petite. But I love strength conditioning with my whole heart. And I was like, you know what? I don't give an F. Like, I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to freaking crush it. Actually, how I got my head around that was I called my husband and I was like, yo, just a heads up. I ended up figuring out the guys who were the other applicants. There's no way I'm getting this job. Like, no way. And my husband, who is a genius, said, Kels, if you're there with them, granted, we didn't like cross paths. Like, they weren't there with me. Like, they interviewed us one at a time. He said, Kels, if you're there, that means that they think you're an equal with them. So you need to act like you're an equal. And I was like, you know what? Amen. Amen. So then got my head wrapped around it, walked into the interview. It was a whole day interview. They took me around campus. I met with 20,000 different people. It was the coolest and most exhausting experience of my life. I had taken that morning. I was like, you know what? I'm a crunchy gal, but I am pumping myself full of Tylenol. I already know I'm going to get a stress headache from all this talking and confidence I need to exude. And I think I took like 3 Tylenols and I was wearing heels. And I was like, I have to wear these heels all day long. I need to be my most professional self and I need to have the best pain tolerance possible. And that means dimming my pain that I had in my heels. And I took that Tylenol. I cranked it out and about, I flew home. I felt like I did really well. I remember I ended up meeting up with my husband after the interview because like he was an hour away. So he drove up to see me because we hadn't seen each other in a while. He's like, how'd it go? And we both like, I think once I told him like who I was going up against for that job, I think we both were like, you know what? I'm going to give it my absolute best shot, but I would not be surprised if I didn't get this job. And I remember meeting up with him that evening and he was like, so, we obviously talked about it. And then at the end, I was like, I think I got it. I think I got the job. And I remember the shock on his face. He was like, wait, are you serious? And I was like, no, I'm serious. Like, based on the feedback I got today, I feel confident I got the job. So then flew back in Kansas, back in my apartment. And I remember getting a call from my future boss, Greg Gatz. And he was like, we'd love to offer you the job, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, got the job at UNC, moved out to Moore County. Here we are, February 2023. I was still, I was working with the track team. February, we're getting ramped up for outdoor season. What did my life look like at that point? My life looked like leaving the house at 7 a.m., driving an hour and 20 minutes, having groups all day long in the weight room, programming all day long because I had to write so many different programs, and then getting home. My last group ended at like 6:45, about 15 minutes to clean up the weight room and lock it up because I was the last coach there every night, and then drive home. And I would get home around 8:30, 8:45. And it's spring season. My cousin, wow. my husband coaches lacrosse at a local high school here. So he's headed into lacrosse season February of last year. And I remember getting home and like dinner wasn't prepared. Like neither of us had like food ready. Neither of us had time to even grocery shop. Pure chaos. I was exhausted. He was exhausted. We like didn't know how to help each other in that season because we were both at our absolute wits' end. And I knew at some point, I was like, I am so blessed to be at this job. But I think one positive of me coming from the tactical world is that I knew, hi, Scout, my dog just walked in. I knew that there were other coaching positions out there, and there was like a world of other opportunities outside of just college athletics, where I think sometimes when you just work in college athletics, you're just like, how could I possibly leave this place? How could I possibly leave this mecca of strength conditioning? Like that seems way more intimidating to leave if that's all you know. And so in the springtime during track season, I was like, okay, Lord, like I really started praying. I was like, man, if I have a desire to have children at some point, if I have a desire to like spend more time with my husband, if I have a desire to like get my house in order and like just like basic needs, I was like, you're going to have to provide for me. You are going to have to open doors for me. Long story short, I obviously ended up getting a new position back with this Air Force unit. It was literally, again, divine intervention. I think around May, May or June of 2023. And then I transitioned to my Air Force unit and I'm back here. Literally exact same unit that I worked for when I was in Kansas for 4 years before I worked for UNC. And it's great. And the biggest thing, I think that big change that happened was because I started More & Co. Like I remember I look at when I purchased my website, I purchased my website April of 2023. And so kind of during that same time, I knew I was like transitioning out of college athletics and going into the tactical world. I knew that I was going to have more margin in my life because now my current job, I work technically 6 to 2, and sometimes I go at 7 and sometimes I'm home at 3. Like it has a little bit more flexibility to it. And I knew that having that margin, like having more space, was going to allow me to have more creative freedom. And that completely coincided with the time that I started More & Co. I think I said this on Marin's podcast, but I said originally um, my Instagram was labeled Living Simple Learning Skills, just because I've always had, like, I'm not a creative artistic person, but I am a creative person in the sense of like, I love learning skills. I love learning new things so I can be more independent. That's like always the underlying thing of like, why do I want to be a better cook? Because I want to be able to learn how to like break down a chicken. Like, I don't want to learn how to make a sauce. Like, I want to learn how to butcher the animal. I want to learn how to make my own bread. I want to learn how to ferment. I want to learn about, so that's the skills part of it. The living simple part is like my husband and I always, not always, but like at kind of the front end of our marriage, we got into a little bit more of like the minimalistic idea. We're not minimalist by any sort of the word, but we do generally, I think, have less things than probably the average person, only because we spend more money on the items that we have. It's not like because we just like save more money. I think it's just because we spend more money on less items. And so that was kind of like the living simple learning skills side of me. And that started when I was in my apartment in Kansas because I needed that like creative skills outlet. And I love doing that. That transitioned to More & Co. in April-ish, May of last year, because I had the creative capacity, I had the margin in my life from my new full-time job to do that. Because now I was working like a regular 40-hour job rather than like 80-hour job or whatever the heck I was working, for UNC. And that kind of blossomed. I first purchased my website. I hired my friend Haley, who was on the podcast, to do my website. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew like I wanted to have some programs out there because I was already doing that for people. I just needed a website and a backing for it. I wanted a way to like, build out PDFs. I wanted the podcast. I wanted to talk with people. Like I wanted to somehow combine my love for strength and conditioning with these strong convictions I had for the environmental, ethical, and nutritional reasons why we should be taking care of our animals and eating animals and having them as part of our life cycle and ecosystem. And that's kind of what More & Co is. It took me a while to kind of articulate that and put that together, but I'm literally still on year one. Year one would technically be April of this year. So, yeah, I think what kind of sparked that was I started working with a local company, Our Riveter Bags. They were actually on Shark Tank. They're amazing. They got an investment from Mark Cuban himself. They're a local bag company started by two military spouses. They take old military uniforms, they turn them into beautiful bags. They're here in town, but they're worldwide. They're amazing. And I collaborated with them on a trailblazer event. They take like a woman that's a trailblazer in her field, and they prop her up and give her a platform to have an event in their space, like in their actual retail shop. And that's how I basically got started with More & Co, at least in Moore County. That's where I live. And so I did my Trailblazer event. It was a crazy event. More people came than I ever expected. I asked my husband to do a coffee cart there because we're super passionate about coffee, which we haven't even talked about before yet on this podcast. But my husband is a coffee connoisseur and he's amazing at it. And we have a little coffee cart on the side. And that was kind of the start. I asked him to do the coffee at the Trailblazer event. That kind of got my name out there in the Moore County area. That grew into me like refining what I was passionate about and what I wanted to talk about. And then that moved into like creating more depth on my Instagram and more depth on my website. And then that turned into at some point being on the Homegrown podcast with Liz and Joey, who are all about real food equals real food freedom. And Liz has an amazing testimony about just talking about how for her personally, the more information you have about food, the less you can have your life be consumed about food or just like all consuming about food. And all at this kind of same time, like maybe a couple years ago, I had already felt really passionate about eating animal based. Not necessarily in the like Paul Saladino version animal based, but really about like the ethics. And I do think there's a nutritional reason, but I'm way less dogmatic about it because that strength conditioning side kind of brings the nuanced idea into it because Paul Saladino is very much like health based, like the technical animal based. Like if you follow Animal Based Bay on Instagram, it's all health based. Well, I work in a performance setting, so there's got to be some nuance. Health and performance are not the same thing, right? Best example would be like health wise, Gatorade is garbage. Performance wise, there's a reason there's sugar in Gatorade. It's because your body needs carbohydrates to fuel your metabolic pathways. So, like, there's got to be an even ground, right? And that's how I'm trying to figure that out now. And that's what I'm trying to show is I'm a crunchy strength coach. That's the whole point. I'm crunchy in regards to like, I don't use chemicals in my house. I'm trying to like make my own sauerkraut. I make my own, laundry detergent. I make sourdough bread. I love like raw milk. I'm a proponent for, knowing your farmer, knowing your butcher. Like I'm crunchy, but I don't wear like those floral dresses and I don't prance around in like flower fields all day. Like I'm a strength coach by trade. And so there's a performance aspect that I wanted to bring in. So this past year, that's kind of what I've been trying to work on is just like, how can I put those together? And the word I'm constantly using is nuance because it's true. Like I'm constantly trying to balance both of those. And I think it's confusing the heck out of a lot of my followers because they're like, okay, protein powder or no protein powder. And I'm like, crunchy side of Kelsey says no protein powder, but performance side of Kelsey says protein powder. You know what I mean? Because on the crunchy side, I'm like, no, you need to be eating whole foods. But then when I'm talking to my guys at work or when I'm talking to like somebody on my consultation, I'm like, I think you really need to be implementing a protein powder, but let's see if we can find the cleanest version of protein powder. That's the nuance I'm trying to bring. And to be honest, I think that so many people in like the health world, the crunchy world, are like trying to use performance ideas and they're just like implementing them into like their health quote unquote life. And I'm like, yo, you don't even need to be dabbling in that. Like pre-workout. That's a great example. I get questions all the time. Like, what's the cleanest pre-workout? And I'm like, don't even touch it. Like garbage. Like go work out in your home gym. Like you're okay. Whereas performance setting, I'm like, guys, do we really need to be pumping like the C4? Like, do we need that? Do we need to be drinking that? Can we drink some coconut water? So it bleeds both ways, right? Like I'm trying to bring a more crunchy idea into the performance setting because, to be honest, especially in the military and in college athletics, my goodness, they are wrapped up in like conventional medicine, traditional dietetics education. There's absolutely no nuance to any of that. They are the front runner of like progressive medicine in the world of like, let's take drugs for everything, rather than like the crunchy side is like, let's never take drugs. Like there's got to be a happy medium. And that's kind of the world that I want to live in. So April, May, I'm transitioning to back to world of Air Force, which is giving me the margin and creativity to launch More & Co. I did my Trailblazer event. I'm working through articulating lots of different hot topics, working through it. I was able to be on the Homegrown podcast that kind of launched me in certain areas. I think more of like this home educated, homegrown, home food, whole food, farmers' wives are now kind of finding me. And that's now kind of my clientele for More & Co. is a lot of like homesteading families, but they realize that their body composition isn't where they want it to be. And so they find me and they're like, let's try to figure this out. I also am incredibly passionate. And again, trying to figure this out with More & Co. I'm trying to find a good balance of like showing positive reviews of like the people that I'm working with. But you guys know at this point, like I am so against showing progress photos because I think the fitness industry absolutely uses the insecurities of women to profits off of those insecurities, just like the beauty industry, right? Like they're profiting off of your own insecurities because you feel bad about how you look, or you see somebody else's progress photo. You're like, I need that. I want that. I'm going to spend money on it. And I'm like, no, I want you to spend money on me. I want you to spend money on my small business because I offer you something different. I offer you a lasting approach to health with a dabble of performance. And obviously, as a Christian, that's also another lens I'm really trying to bring in and really articulate because something I talk about a lot, especially when I'm guests on podcasts, is like I usually get asked like, "What's your view of the self love movement, like the body positivity movement?" And I always say, from a Christian perspective, it's like we're never supposed to get our value from our bodies. We're never supposed to get our value outside of anything but what God and what Christ says about us. And you can read that in the Bible, that we are made in the image of God. We bear characteristics of God Himself. And that should give us the backbone to go and live life to the fullest. And whether you're shredded and you're lean or whether you are obese, and on another level, like I am in my, I'm 29 today. Woo. Girls my age, like, are really trying to figure out their fertility. Like whether you're fertile and you got 10,000 kids or you have no kids and you've been struggling with infertility for forever, like your fertility does not define you because that's not who we are in Christ. Like who we are in Christ is we are made whole. And even if your worst nightmare happens, you never have a spouse, you never have children, you never have all of your dreams and goals come to fruition. At the end of the day, I know that I can live. I can live with confidence because I know that God made me whole because of what Jesus did for me on the cross. Look at me, I'm already preaching. It takes about 5 seconds and I go down that rabbit hole. But anyways, we have to basically, I started articulating, we have to separate our value from our health. Like that's also just side note. I always say this. This is like the basic, like pro-life argument. Like we cannot give value to things just because like they're dependent on others or they don't contribute to society, or because of a health status. Like we give babies, we give children, we give people in comas, we give homeless people all of the same value. If you kill one of those things, you will still be charged with murder. It's the exact same thing. So if we've already logically wrapped our head around this idea of our values not attached to our health or our contribution to society or our dependability on others, then we can just say, check, I am valuable because of what Christ said about me and what He did for me. Now I can objectively look at my health because I recognize it is affecting my quality of life. That's the stance that I want to come from. And so I would say the summertime, moving into fall of 2023, I started really articulating that. Then I launched my free ebook on my website, started getting my email list put together, and now I'm sending newsletters. And now the latest thing, I'm so excited about it. The number one question I get is if I offer nutrition information on my website or with my memberships. And now I can say, yes, girl, I do. For $5 a month, literally $5 a month, you can be part of the Crunchy Company. The Crunchy Company. Okay. The Crunchy Company is on my website. All of my workout memberships already include a membership to the Crunchy Company. But if you don't want my workout memberships and you just want the nutrition information and as part of the Crunchy Company and my workout memberships, you are allotted the ability to have a Zoom call with me once a month, a group Zoom call. Super pumped about it. 30-minute Zoom call. I post the links on the Crunchy Company site. For $5 a month, you can have all of my articles that I'm continually writing. I'm trying to do once a month, do a meal plan, pumping out information with all of my food and animal and farming producers and partners. It's a collective. It's a collective people that want health and fitness information, but through the lens of Christian living, through the lens of animal-based nutrition. And that's where I can put it, because without that member site, like without that collective of people, that company of people, like I didn't have a very good way of distributing nutrition information, because Train Heroic, the app I use for my workout memberships, is amazing. It's amazing for strength and conditioning, but it was not very conducive for like pumping out nutrition information. So anyways, always writing articles, trying to, post more information for people. And I did, to be honest, feel like I needed to be behind like a small paywall, just because if I'm just like putting nutrition information out there, then that's just like a lot of time and effort for me to be putting out there when I'm already putting out so much free information on my Instagram. I was like, there is something to be said about when people invest in something, they're more likely to absorb it. They're more likely to implement it into their life. They're more likely to be invested, just like mentally and communally. Communally? I don't know if that's a word. Even if it's just $5 a month. I put $5 a month on there or $50 a year, your choice, but you can be part of the Crunchy Company. I'm super excited about it. And to reiterate, all of my workout memberships already include a membership to the Crunchy Company. But if you don't want the workout memberships and you just want to be part of the company, you can. $5 a month. You can sign up on my website. Super easy. So there's that. And I don't highlight this enough, honestly, because they have been booked out. People are pumping out these free 15-minute phone calls. But generally on Mondays, I open up my afternoon for free 15-minute phone calls with me, and I am booked out for a couple weeks. But if you're interested in a free 15-minute phone call with me, and don't get me wrong, I have had people book these just to talk with me, literally just to chat, which is fine. That's the reason why I did it. People are looking for connection. And if I can give them like a snippet of my time that I've already blocked out to make connection, that is quite literally the more and company that I am looking for in this whole community I'm trying to build. But if you have questions about strength and conditioning, you have questions about animal-based nutrition, you have questions about equipment needs, shoe types, how you can better fit training into your regular life. Like I had a vet call me a couple weeks ago and she was like, I live on the road. Like, what should I do? What kind of dumbbells should I buy? I'm like, perfect. This is exactly what these calls are set up for. And that can kind of take a lot of my more serious direct messages I get on Instagram. I always try to point them towards booking a free 15-minute phone call with me, because Instagram direct messages are like a love-hate thing for me. Love because I can answer people's questions that they have. Hate because there's such little room for a nuanced answer. And if I'm trying to balance this health and performance idea, this crunchy strength coach idea, where I'm trying to find a middle ground and like trying to have like a level head about all these questions people have, then which also spurred on my podcast because I'm able to flesh this out. Then a free 15-minute phone call is so much easier for me to answer, just to be honest and upfront. Schedule that with me. It's like the best thing that I offer. It's literally free. So yeah, I pumped out my free ebook that has two free 2 weeks of strength training on it, dumbbell based strength training on it. And if you already have that ebook and You didn't know? The PDF is hyperlinked with YouTube videos. Okay, ladies? So if you're trying out this strength training and you don't know where to start, get my free ebook. It's worth it. It gives you the basics and the basis of how I'm structuring More & Co., animal-based nutrition and strength training, and all of the exercises are hyperlinked. Okay, please take advantage of it because that took me forever to put together. And I wanted you to know that. So, pumped out my free ebook, doing the workout memberships. I still have consultations available, but those are kind of few and far between that people purchase nowadays. I'm still kind of figuring out some kinks with my small group coaching. I just finished my first group of my ladies with their 20s and 30s group. It went amazing, and I have tons of reviews to put on my website, but I'm trying to figure out like the small, not the small, the best way to like pump out those reviews, in the best way. I don't want to bombard people with it, but that's basic marketing. So still trying to figure that out. And then in the future, I think looking forward to 2024, like this 30th year of my life. Remember, I have completed 29 years. Looking forward to my 30th year, I am, I really want to put together a Bible study. And I have this idea. I'm not going to tell it on the podcast because it's going to come to fruition at some point. This combo of Bible study and workout together in person. So it's going to be local here in Moore County. Have not figured out the deets of that yet, but it's going to happen. Okay. That's my year in review. Lots of Moore & Co details. Let's talk about why the heck I chose to run a 50-mile race, which, that was kind of my first episode of the podcast, but we're just going to review. The reason why is because I needed a challenge. I was a sprinter in college. So like this distance running is absolutely foreign. And if you think that sprinting and running long distance, like just running in general is the same, I can promise you it's absolutely not the same. Please trust me on that. Okay. This is an absolute challenge. And I told George, my running coach from the very beginning, this is going to be a challenge more on my timeline, my schedule, and creating margin in my life than it is going to be a physical challenge. Granted, when I get to the day of and I'm going to have to reckon with the idea of running 50 miles, that's going to be a doozy. But I know physically I can push myself in ways where I can accomplish things. That's not me being like cocky. I'm just like, I know myself. Like the day of, I will rise to the occasion. But the lead up, the 6 months of training up to that, that's where I need the trimming of my life. And I have seen that. And now that I'm 2 weeks out, I had my first ramp up with all my mileage. And I saw that. It's like, you know what? I'm pretty dang busy. I am working full time. I'm still an Army reservist. And I am still running More & Co. I'm a wife. Like, I got things going on. And yet I have still made the time and I have carved out the priority to get my training done. Like that in itself has been a big accomplishment for me. So that's super positive. I will say that I've been kind of nursing my right Achilles for, I don't know, since the very beginning, to be honest. And it kind of flared up this past weekend and it mentally just really got to me. So Friday, a couple days ago, I had 1 hour of training. And in my head, like when I'm running on the trail, I think like 1 hour is equal to 4 miles generally, because like with the walking and the hiking up hills, it kind of evens out about 15 minutes a mile, which sounds super slow to like a road runner, like somebody who just does road running. But when you're on a trail, like you are navigating like roots and steps and stairs and your pack and like goos and gels. And like there's so much more going on when you're trail running and climbing and downhills. And like it's a lot. So I pretty much average about 15 minutes a mile. So Friday, a couple days ago, I had 1 hour. That's kind of like the pre little warm up for Saturday and Sunday. And so I ran about 4.5. And then Saturday morning, I had drill for the Army. I had to be on Teams. I had to be on Microsoft Teams at 8 a.m. And then I had a nutrition seminar that I was teaching. Talk about freaking margin. Kelsey, like I'm proud of myself for doing all of this, but at the same time, I'm like, this is literally, Kelsey, this is what you're literally trying to avoid. Like stop packing your Saturdays. Like this is the point. Like stop scheduling things. Like spread it out, you know? Anyways, So Saturday comes around and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to sit around through drill, through my Army Teams meeting, my 3-hour Teams meeting, into teaching a nutrition seminar at a local ballet studio, all while knowing that I had a 3-hour run that I had to complete that day. No way. I was like, you know what? I know my motivation in the morning. It's so much better in the morning. I'm going to suffer and I will wake up at 3 a.m. And that's what I did. I woke up at 3 a.m. on Saturday morning and I ran from 4 to 7. Technically 4:02 to 7:02. Okay. That's what I did. And I practiced my aid stations at my house. I found a 4-mile loop and I was like, you know what? If I can complete a 4-mile loop every hour, I will complete about 12 miles. Because that's what I had. Well, I technically had a 3-hour run, but in my head, I was like, okay, that's about 12 miles for me because it kind of evens out again, 15 minutes a mile, blah, blah, blah. Woke up at I woke up at 3 a.m., started the espresso machine, had an espresso with my butter and my whole milk, which I always have, which I get questions on Instagram all the time. You pull the shot of espresso over the butter. You don't put the butter in your milk, okay? Especially if you're frothing the milk. Please don't do that. Put the butter in your cup, pour the shot of espresso over the butter, do a little mixy, froth your milk, then dump it in, okay? So I have that every morning. So I was like, I knew that was going to be fine in my stomach. Had that, prepared myself. You got to put your socks on, certain socks, certain shoes. You got to take your body glide. You got to lube up the thighs. You got to lube up the feet. Like, it's not just like putting on clothes and running. Okay. Like when you're doing a trail run, like you got to prep. So I had my aid stations. I had my goos set out. I set up my spring energy gels. I had 1.5 liters of water in my pack, my day pack that I had. And I set out at freaking 4 a.m. in the pitch dark. I had a headlamp on, which ended up being a super crappy headlamp. So that's annoying. Need to buy a new headlamp. But I went to the local trails by my house. And then at about 4:20, when I realized that I was out in the wilderness all by myself, I was like, Kelsey, you're about to fight some demons out here. Mainly being like nervous about the dark and like the animals and everything. But I was like, you know what? I live in one of the safest counties. Like, I am going to be A-okay. So I did 2 loops of that. And I was kind of bummed. I think I bought some applesauce, like regular applesauce from Aldi. And I think it was kind of rancid because I got a little bubble guts on each of those loops. Thank God my aid station was my house, so I could use the restroom, but tried to keep my aid stations under 5 minutes. And I did. My first aid station stop was 4 minutes. My second aid station stop was 3 minutes to take my trash out of my pack and like put the new goos in, use the restroom, and then leave again. So I did 2 loops. And then my third loop, like my right Achilles was really starting to bother me. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to switch out my shoes. So I changed my shoes really quick, switched out my stuff in my pack, and then I was like, I'm gonna road run for the last, hour ish that I had. I think I had like 45 minutes that I had. And because of the road running being a lot faster, rather than the trail, and like again, something also to note on a trail is like versus road running. On a trail, you have a lot of lateral movement that's happening because you're stepping on rocks and roots and stuff. And you're also moving like side to side, like kind of weaving around trees. Whereas on a road, like you're just linear. So you're kind of on train tracks. So if you kind of imagine that. Whereas on a trail, like some of your lateral like stabilizers really start to get fatigued, like your glutes, your adductors, and like this one particular spot on the inside of my ankle, which is kind of connected to my big toe, really started to bother me, which I've had for months and months. Like it just kind of pops up every once in a while when I'm like really fatigued. Started popping up and I was like, you know what, my last hour, I'm going to road run. So I road ran, finished 13 miles. And I was like, okay. So literally got home, made breakfast, hopped in the shower, and then was on a Teams meeting for 3 hours for the Army. Okay. When we say like the Army owns your life, like it's these moments where the circus music is playing in the background of your life. You're like, I just got done running 12 miles and now I need to like go and zombie out on my computer for 3 hours, like listening to these PowerPoints. Nothing against the Army, but it's just like, it just kind of adds up. Then that happened, and then I immediately went to my nutrition seminar, taught a nutrition seminar at the local ballet studio with these young girls. It was really good. Came home, then I was like, okay, I need to prepare my mind and my heart because I needed to go get some elevation gain at a trail that was about an hour away. My husband decided he was going to come with me. we went out there. I prepared myself. I started getting pretty anxious because I was like, my freaking Achilles, like, dude, it's already shot. Like, ah. And he was like, it's going to be okay, Kels. Like, worst case, you walk. Like, that's the whole point of trail running. Like, worst case, you walk. There's nothing wrong with walking. There are some like logistical things that happen, if you go too slow on a trail, like sometimes they boot you off the race because you have to have like these check-in times. And I think that's what I'm like the most nervous about moving up into my 50 miler is that I'm just going to be too slow and they're going to not let me finish the race. That's like a sidebar. I'm sure I'll talk about that at some point. So we went out, found about a 12-mile, like down and back, so like 6 miles down, 6 miles back. And the end, like the turnaround point is on the top of this mountain. So I was like, I'm going to have a lot of elevation gain about halfway through this. Miles 1 through 8, spectacular. I was on my A game with my goos. I was on my A game with my water. Like I was crushing it. My husband was like so encouraging. Like it was great. It was very positive. About mile 8, I was like, you know what? I'm getting pretty fatigued. At this point, the accumulated mileage that I had ran, 8 plus 12 plus 4, is 24 miles. At about 24 miles over the weekend, my body was like, I think we're toast. And I started rolling my ankles so bad, but it wasn't like the outer portions of my ankles that started hurting. It was just like I kept cranking on that one freaking spot on my right Achilles, like that internal, like more, if you know anatomical terms, the medial portion of it's not actually my Achilles, it's actually my big toe. It's like my flexor hallucis longus or whatever that muscle is. I should know this, but anyways, it was that portion that really started getting really irritated. And that just started running all the way up the back of my calf, like pretty much to my knee, like the inside portion of my knee, my medial portion. There was one time where like I rolled it so bad, I was like on the ground and I was like, ah! And in my head, I was like, I gotta walk it off. Like if I sit here, my ankle's gonna swell up. Like that's not what we want. So, anyways, finally finished, but like it was rough. Those last 4 miles, like those are the longest 4 miles of my life. Finished, I was like a total zombie. And at that point, like I started having like actual pain. Like when my Achilles was bothering me, it was mainly just like when I was exercising with it. I'd never had pain just like sitting there when it was like not under load. And now I'm like sitting in the car. My husband's driving home. By the way, let's have like a more nuanced approach to food. Okay. I had just burned like 2,000 calories. And what did we do? We went through the McDonald's drive through and I pounded a double quarter pounder, a fry, and a water bottle. Okay. Just, I know that meat probably comes from China. It's imported. It's terrible for you. I needed calories. Okay. If you know my nutrition pyramid, my nourishing pyramid, the bottom portion, my dog's barking, sorry. The bottom portion is eating enough calories. We ate McDonald's, double quarter pounders of cheese. Okay. It happened. I'm sorry. And the cheese, that cheese is made from seed oils. Like I know all these answers. Okay. I had just pumped like 150 grams of like pure sugary carbs into my system and I needed something salty. And that was the choice that we made. So anyway, I started having pain in my right Achilles and I was like, oh my gosh, like at this point I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I had ran 29-ish, 30-ish miles that weekend. Driving home and I was like, this is not good. My husband was like, all right, I got to take the reins. So he went out, bought some ice. We did an ice bath. At that point, like he put so much ice in the ice bath that when I got in, I was so tired, so overwhelmed, in so much pain. I just started bawling my eyes out. And I'm sitting there in the bathtub, like literally bawling my eyes out. And he's just sitting there, like on the toilet, just like rubbing my back. He was not using the restroom, but you know what I mean? Just like sitting there, rubbing my back, being like, it's okay, Kels. Like, it's okay. It's okay. Just keep crying. Like, you're fine. It's okay. I know you've had a long weekend. It's all right. And, sorry, my dog just keeps walking loops around me. I was just like bawling. I just was like so mentally fatigued, physically fatigued, in pain. The ice bath was so freaking uncomfortable. I think you put like 6 bags of ice in there. I'm not kidding. Literally 6 bags of ice. It was one of the coldest ice baths I've ever had. But when you have swelling, like you need to have contrast. You need to ice it so that your capillaries constrict, get smaller, and then you go into the heat, the sauna or a hot shower, and then you vasodilate and then you pump new blood in there. And remember, your lymphatic system is passive. So you have to facilitate that fluid movement either through the pumping of your blood vessels or through muscle contraction. Well, I was in so much pain. There ain't no way I was doing muscle contractions. Like I wasn't going to do a calf raise, for example. Like I was dying. So we did contrast. Actually, before I got in the ice bath, I did voodoo flossing. It's kind of hard to explain. Basically, voodoo flossing is when you like wrap your joint with this like really stretchy band, like super tight. You pump all the fluid out. You basically let it like kind of go numb, and then you let go of the band, and new blood and new fresh like fluid and nutrients go to the area, kind of repair the site, and it helps keep swelling down. So I voodoo flossed my ankle and my foot like 3 times. Then I got in the ice bath. Then I started crying. Then I got out of the ice bath. I like hobbled to the other bathroom, the other shower, cranked the heat on, sat there, cried in the shower, drank a Topo Chico. Then my husband was like, "Kels, you got to do another round. Like we have to continue to contrast this." And I was like, oh, "You're right." And I'm still crying, right? We hobble then back to the bathroom. I put my foot back in the ice tub. I start bawling again. I have this overwhelming feeling of nausea. I'm like, dude, I am going to puke. He's like, you're not going to puke. It's going to be okay. I'm like, I'm going to puke. He hands me the trash can. I don't puke. I start crying again. I am like bawling my eyes out so hard. It's like an uncontrollable sob. I'm wrapped up in a towel. I'm like wiping my face with a towel. Literally, like I'm out of control sobbing. Like I just needed to like let it go. Like I'm a strong girl, but like I needed to leave. And then he's like, kind of giggling with me, in between like little cry sessions. He's like, this is what people need to see on your Instagram. I'm like, no, it's just for you. And he's like, I know, you can cry with me, girls. He's rubbing my back. And then I get out after like 3 minutes and then I hobble back to the shower and I finally take a regular shower. I get out of the shower, I end up voodoo flossing it again. Pain has left. Not taking any pain meds. Wake up this morning. It's a little tender and I'm going to go to see a PT friend. He's going to work on it this evening. But it's just like interesting. I'm always trying to like figure out the difference between like showing and like the marketing side of Instagram where I'm like trying to show my wins, but it's not like manipulative. Like I'm genuinely like a happy person. Like I want people to like be with me and like celebrate with me on these high moments of my life. Like that's what I want. I want people with me on my highs. But I have a hard time with Instagram when people show their lows because part of me, which maybe the Lord needs to work on my heart. That is true. The Lord does need to work on my heart. I need to let the Lord work on my heart in this area. When people show some lows on Instagram, sometimes I'm so cynical. I just think you're just posting that because what you want is the responses from other people to be like, no, you're actually amazing. No, you're actually perfect. And then they're like, oh my gosh, my community is amazing. I feel so much better now. And I'm like, well, no crap, Cindy. I don't know a Cindy, but it's like, no crap, Cindy. You put your low on there. Like, of course, people are going to be like, no, you're amazing. You're beautiful. You're wonderful. You're perfect. So part of me is like, I don't want that. Like, that's never what I'm asking for. So how am I supposed to show authenticity on Instagram, but not try to like get feedback from people just to stroke my ego? Do we understand that hard part? I don't know. And like I've realized that recently, I posted like a couple like downer things on Instagram and the people will respond and be like, I understand, like it's okay, Kels, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that feels so good. But I don't ever want to be dependent on people's like responses to me for my like affirmation. But that's me, like at my core, probably judging those people that do that. And that's my own problem. And I need to like ask for forgiveness and work on that and just like be filled with compassion for those people and not just be like, you're just doing it for the responses. But that's my sinful nature. And that's just like raw. So, anyways, when my husband was like, people on Instagram need to see this, I'm like, but do they? Like, I don't know. Like, this is real life. And like, only real life, like I cry with my husband. Like I cry on other things too, but like when it comes to like me, like showing my lowest points, like I'm in pain and I'm vulnerable and I'm cold and I'm tired and I'm overwhelmed, like that's just for him, you know? I don't know. It just like really made me think. So that happened last night. Woke up this morning. I generally feel okay. Like my hips, glutes, knees, hamstrings, all fine. Not sore. I could run again. Just my freaking calf and my Achilles. And I talked to my coach today and he was like, you know what, we're going to ride the bike for a couple days. Like let's work on it. So that's why I hired him, because he is my voice of reason. I always say this as a coach, like one of the biggest things that's hard on coaches is like this idea that they should know better or they should have all the answers. They should also not only have the scientific answers for strength and conditioning, but they should also have the willpower and the discipline to do everything perfectly. And that's just not reality. And that's why I hired George. And that's kind of my expectation why people hire me. It's because I realize like we all need somebody to help us out. That's just regular life. Like you outsource when you're at a point where it's become a priority and you don't know what to do. You outsource. That's the whole point. So, anyways, he's my voice of reason and I'm still working on it. And that's currently where I'm at. And I'm 29. And I want to make a good salmon in the air fryer tonight. And I'm going to probably watch The Office because I love The Office. And that's what I'm going to do tonight. My husband's at lacrosse practice. I'm just hanging out and I'm going to enjoy the evening. And I recorded a podcast. Thanks for being here. I appreciate the company in the More and Company motto. Love ya. Talk to you later. Bye.